And it is official from Vegas. James Neal selected by the Vegas Golden Knights, as we told you earlier today. He's off to Vegas. He's going to be a headliner for the Golden Knights on probably their top line. Probably going to be their top goal scorer next year, at least until the trade deadline, when he's likely to be dangled out there to bring in some more prospects. He is by far the biggest headline name that Vegas has gotten so far, and we knew that was going to be the case. The Preds are a loaded roster right now. That's why they got to the Stanley Cup final. All that depth through the injuries in the playoffs. You knew they were going to lose a good player. They had hoped to somehow protect James Neal in a trade. They were unable to get that done with George McPhee over the past week. And so James Neal is now a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Preds will have to look for some way. GM David Poile, who's, as we said, up for an award in any moment now in Vegas for General Manager of the Year, he's going to have to figure out how to fill that hole at some point here. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's scored 20 goals every year of his career in the NHL. 31 a couple of years ago for the Preds. And, by the way, a guy that played with some real heart in the playoffs. He played the final 11 games and really most of the 12th with a broken hand. I mean, that's some guts. He scored the game winner in Game 1 in Anaheim in the Western Conference Final. After breaking his hand early on in the game, he scores the game winner in overtime. Got 2 more goals during the playoffs in the rest of the way. Playing with a broken hand. One of the best shooters and goal scorers in the entire league. Now a Vegas Golden Knight. Phone lines are open. 737-7767 is the number. Let's go to David. David, good evening.
Yes, I have 2 questions.
Sure.
My first question is, why is it that the Penguins are able to protect their players?
Well, they're going to give up Marc-Andre Fleury in all likelihood.
Yes. And then my second question is, why did the Predators, not protect a player that the Golden Knights would not want to take?
I mean, there were too many of them, David, to be honest. I mean, this is a roster full of really good players for the Predators right now, and they could only, based off of the fact that Pekka Rinne had a no-movement clause and they were going to protect their top 4 D-men. I mean, that's the best single unit in the entire NHL, in my mind, is the top 4 D-men for the Predators. So they had to go with the 1-4-4 protection scheme, which meant they could only protect 4 forwards. So they protected their top line, and then there was a decision whether you would do young up-and-coming centers like a Calle Jarnkrok, who they ended up protecting, or maybe a Colton Sissons, who was a superstar in the playoffs, or a guy like James Neal, who's a veteran and has been huge in production. But again, he's $5 million next year, final year of his contract, and older at 29 years of age. The Preds hope to keep them all working on a deal, but they obviously decided that Jarnkrok was the more valuable piece given his contract and his age and the fact he plays center, where again you've got a question mark about Mike Fisher, whether the captain will come back or go to retirement. So they went that way, and that ultimately Vegas wouldn't make a deal, and they selected Neal.
Yes, but the Golden Knights were not going to take the other players that the Predators are protecting, chose to protect instead of Neal.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to answer this other than had they protected Neal, they would have had to have exposed Calle Jarnkrok.
Yeah, but the Golden Knights are not going to be looking for young.
I mean, that's pretty much all they've drafted tonight is young players. Their entire draft tonight is projects and prospects and trying to get more prospects. They're not trying to win next year. They're trying to win over the long haul. Calle Jarnkrok would be a no-brainer for them. With 2 years left on his contract at a very reasonable rate, 26 years of age. I mean, you're going to lose him if you put him out there. And if it wasn't him, it would be Colton Sissons for some preference reason of the 2 centers. But you're going to lose one of those 2 centers if you protect James Neal. What I'm saying is ultimately the contract of $5 million next year for only 1 year, where the other guys are locked up longer, and the fact that there's some uncertainty on the center line right now for the Preds because of Mike Fisher's status. that's why they went the direction they did. And I know a lot of people are upset with that because of Neal's production and all that, and I get it. But we knew the Preds were going to lose a good player in this draft. It just happens to be James Neal.
I looked at the mock draft this morning on what the NHL analysts were saying, on what they are saying. But how is it that the Penguins, 2 champions in a row, are able to, protect their players? The mock draft this morning, did not list any of the good players that the Penguins had.
Well, here's where they got lucky, I guess, if you're talking about it, is they have a really good backup goaltender, Marc-Andre Fleury, behind Matt Murray. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury's been a part and played a lot in each of these 2 playoffs where they've won Stanley Cups. He was the starter last year going into the postseason, and he had to start this year because Murray was out with a torn hamstring for the first 2 rounds. They got lucky in that sense that they could expose their backup goaltender, and he would be a guy that was highly coveted. They also exposed Chris Kunitz, who's won 4 Stanley Cup titles for them. They've got a bunch of guys who are interesting pieces that were exposed. It's just the Golden Knights are going to take a guy like Fleury who they can stick in net on day 1.
Paul has won the award now.
Well, yeah, that is breaking just now. So and much deserved. So we appreciate the call, David. It's hard to compare certain teams because every situation is different. But there were some big names out there, and some teams were able to protect him. Minnesota made a trade earlier today, although it hasn't been officially announced, but seemingly made a trade to protect a prospect with another prospect, and what that did was it allowed them to save some of the guys that they exposed, like Matt Dumba, who's a good defenseman for them. He's going to be back now because they were able to protect them. That's what the Preds hope to do. They just weren't able to get it done because James Neal apparently was a guy that they coveted that much. So, interesting stuff for sure. We will move on here. Let's get to David Poile, now an award winner out in Vegas. David Poile, Peter Laviolette talking about this recent team. We'll go to the Q&A, Courtney, so we'll go to not the opening stuff, but the next clip we have available, and listen to those guys wrapping up and answering some of the questions, because now there's another question. What do you do without James Neal moving forward for this team? Short off season, new questions. How do you build off of this great run from last year? Here's David Poile and Peter Laviolette.
David, you alluded to the All-Star game and then what the playoffs brought. What do you think that will mean for this franchise in terms of national television games and possible outdoor games and other NHL events going forward?
Well, starting with Sean Henry and our ownership, will be lobbying the league for all those things. I mean, we want to be as big a player as we can in the league and have a positive effect on the league. Selfishly, and I think deservedly so, I think we should be getting more national TV games. I mean, there's always been talk about an outdoor game, and even Gary Bettman brought that up in one of his comments that maybe Nashville was more deserving of a game. I don't think there's anything to it at the moment, but I don't see why we shouldn't move towards all of those things. Whatever the NHL is doing, whatever the most important things are in the NHL in terms of exposure, we will do everything we can to make sure that Nashville is right there in the forefront.
Chris in the back.
Peter, just as a competitor, as the next couple of months go on, you sit more and reflect about the series and the season. Just I wonder if you could say that early whistle in the last game, how much will that stick in your craw and kind of define how this series ended for you?
You know, those things are tough. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was thinking back to 2006 when we won a championship in Carolina, and I thought about some of the things that have to go your way in order to be successful at the end. And two of the things that stuck out for me were just the breaks and the bounces and the call or whatever it might be. Those bounces, you know, while you have a game plan in place and you train all year and you do things, a break and a bounce or something that's timely inside of a series, any series, a final series, I think those things always can move things one way or the other. The other one was health and not sustaining major injuries. And if you know, we had guys that had to come out of the lineup for maybe a week or 10 days, but they would be able to come back. And I think the two injuries that we sustained to Ryan Johansson and Kevin Fiala, those were season-ending injuries. They were going to be 4 months, and no sign and no chance of these guys coming back. So, like I said, our guys played hard. We have no regrets. We're disappointed about the outcome, and you know, it's a tough thing because everybody was dialed in to win a championship. Everybody, I mean, our guys, the city, the fans. You know, it's just, I think from that point, I think that's why I started off and said that there's an emptiness, you know, in your stomach, that you wake up and we were down a road, everybody was dialed in, and now it's over. So that's always disappointing.
Chris, if I could answer a little bit more. I mean, as a general manager, that's you know, we change and make rules in the National Hockey League. I mean, I'm very disappointed and frustrated of what happened in Game 6 with the goal that wasn't allowed. I'm disappointed that the system doesn't allow it. We as managers, somewhat of the gatekeepers of the game, we've got to put in place a system where the right call is always made. Everybody knows that the goal should have counted, but the system was not there to allow the goal to be counted. And I will do everything I can to try to help that. It's past tense now for the Predators, but going forward, we always want the right call to be made.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with that. What you thought about that rule in particular, and also the goal that was disallowed in Game 1. Are you comfortable with the way that, for both of you, with the way that rule is, and you know, could that or should that be changed in any way?
You can go ahead.
It's we are trying, and I'm speaking as the manager of the Predators, but also as one of the 31 managers in the league. We're trying to do the right thing, to make the right call. Sometimes when you do things, you get unintended consequences. And the video review has, for the most part, been a great addition to our game, has accomplished what we wanted it to do. It's given us the right call almost all the time, but it's not perfect. And the offside in Game 1 was one of those situations. In our opinion, that wasn't offside. But in the league's view, it was offside. How do we get on the same page on that? I mean, that was a 50-50 call, and it didn't go our way. That's very frustrating. And I'm sure it is for our fans, it is for our players, and we've got to keep working to find a system that allows us to, I guess you'll never be perfect, but closer to more to 100% in agreement than just 50-50.
Peter, you kind of made a joke after the Western Conference Final that you made it with 3 teams because other teams fired you. But to have done it now, how is this run different? And are you in any way different at this point of your career, given what you've gone through?
I think it's special. Anytime you get there and you can get to a Final 2, and certainly the ultimate goal is a championship, it's a special thing. It's a special group. It's hard to compare one to the other. You know, I think it wouldn't be right to say this was better than something or that was better than something. I think that every run is special, and your team really has to play well. They have to go through a lot to get to that point, to play for a championship, to be one of the final two teams. For me, I look at it as I've been really fortunate to be in great organizations with great teams and get to a position to be there and play for the cup. I don't really look at it more in a big picture like you're asking. I feel fortunate that David called me a few years ago and asked me to be the coach of the Predators. We have great players inside the room. They are so great to work with on a daily basis. I know you guys see that. I know you see them in the community. Who they are I mean, everybody talks about Pekka Rinne, everybody talks about Roman Josi, talks about Mike Fisher, and all of that is 100% true. I get to work with those players on a daily basis, and it's just awesome for me and the coaching staff to have such great character and great pieces in the room that care about each other, care about this organization, care about the city, care about people, and it's been a pleasure to be here. So if you're asking me how I really feel, I feel fortunate and blessed to be in a situation like this where I work with great people on a daily basis.
David, have the Buffalo Sabres asked for permission to talk to Phil Housley at this point?
As you know, to stay consistent, we don't discuss what other people might be doing or not doing.
Adam over on the right.
This is a question for both of you. It's sort of hard to believe that I think in 2 weeks from tomorrow was the anniversary of the trade that you made for PK. And I know that it was a calculated risk that you had to make, and it changed the complexion of this franchise a lot. I guess just from both of your perspective, from what you thought you were, what you thought you were going to get when the trade was made to now you had a full season of seeing him, how he works with this team on the ice as a part of this organization in the community. I guess, what are your takeaways from your first year with PK, and is there anything that you saw or that was maybe a pleasant surprise or unexpected from what you thought, what you got when you traded for him?
I think the managers in making a deal is different than the coach. I just mean that my vision almost all the time is a longer vision of where the game is going, what we need. You kind of stagger your contracts, a lot of different situations. So from my perspective, it was a really difficult deal. I mean, I'm probably repeating things I've said all the time. I mean, we weren't looking to trade our captain and Shea Weber, but this opportunity presented itself. And when you look at all of the things from how the game is being played, another thing just is, very honestly, this is the age difference of almost 4 years. And, I don't mean it exactly this way, but if you're going to stay the same, then you might be getting the same results all the time, too. And even though we were tracking, really well by going to the second round a year ago, we still didn't win. And I certainly felt, in my mind, that trading for PK was a deal that could work out for us in the long run. And I myself felt that this year might be a difficult year. He never asked to be traded. There's going to be lots of big-time transition for him, both on and off the ice. It's going to be a big change for our team, chemistry-wise, culture-wise. I mean, it certainly was a big risk. End result, I think it got better as the season went on. He had to deal with some injuries. It certainly peaked at the end of the year, and he absolutely played his best hockey in the playoffs. And I think the future, in terms of his comfort here in Nashville as a player and living here, and his contribution on the ice, I think it will only get better. I think he's just hitting the prime of his career. So I feel good with where we are with PK Subban.
Well, Peter Laviolette talking about the Predators year-end. More from them on the other side of this break. Phone lines are still open, 737-7767, if you'd like to get in on that discussion. Again, breaking news tonight, James Neal selected by Vegas in the expansion draft, so he is now a member of the Golden Knights, no longer a member of the Predators. And David Poile, who you just heard from, the NHL General Manager of the Year. Congratulations to him on the great run. More from the NHL GM of the Year and head coach Peter Laviolette on the other side of this break. You're watching SportsLine on News Channel 5+.